This is the third in the series of virtual gatherings. We have examined the impact of the pandemic on the practice of public relations. We've taken a look at the life and experiences of a female radio personality, which was a great session a week or so ago. And today, we turn to the momentous topic of leadership during the era of COVID-19. Now, to do that, we turn to a woman who has exhibited an exemplary track record of leadership in media, marketing, and business operations. Vicki Linz is the president and CEO of CTAM. She's been doing that for going on 5 years now. And I might add, Vicki's the host of a great podcast that I'd encourage you to tune into called Thinking Out Loud. Real quick, Vicki, without thinking, who is your favorite interview so far of all the people you've talked to in 30 or so podcasts?
Oh, Rob, if I answered that question, I wouldn't be sitting at the helm of CTAM. I love every single conversation. And I actually mean that sincerely because I learned something from everyone I talk to.
That's great. Well, we'll all tune in and decide for ourselves, and maybe we can cast votes with you. As I mentioned, this incredible track record of Vicki's career and leadership. She previously has served as EVP and Global Chief Marketing Officer for United Way Worldwide, EVP and CMO for Clear Channel Outdoor, SVP and CMO for Canoe Ventures, which is an important interactive advertising venture. She's also been in marketing and communications and leadership positions at Comcast, AdLink, AirTouch Cellular, and GTE. And just as importantly, and you're what, only 25 years old. It's amazing how you've racked all that up. And you're the mom, a great mom of a teenage son. How has that been these last few months, helping your son cope with all of these circumstances?
I actually thought I was very adept at dealing with challenge and change until Bowden turned 13, and then it became a whole different wild ride.
I'll bet. Well, he's lucky to have you and your husband to help him kind of plot the path forward, particularly during challenging times. We have some really important and critical issues in the area of leadership that we'd like to get to in just a moment. But Vicki, first, I'd invite you to tell us a little bit about, for those that are uninitiated, a little bit about CTAM, what the mission is, what the purpose of it, and what it is the association does.
Of course. Hi, everyone. It's really, really special for me to be here. I've really been looking forward to this conversation. It's a sweet spot of passion for mine, so bear with me if I lean in a little hard to the conversation at hand. CTAM. CTAM is a marketing organization that focuses on the media, entertainment, and technology industries. We are a membership organization, notably comprised of all of the leading distributor, pay TV, broadband provider companies, as well as all of the leading network streaming companies, as well as technology suppliers, research suppliers, and other vendors who serve the media, entertainment, technology community. At the center of CTAM is collective impact. So what does that mean? It means we focus on addressing business challenges and opportunities where everyone is better off by coming together. So examples of that would be piracy. Piracy is a $50 billion plus problem for the industry. It hits everybody's bottom lines. It had been very effectively addressed from a technology perspective, from a policy perspective, but it was not being addressed from a marketing perspective or a consumer perspective. And so that's where CTAM gets involved. And we're working with our members to educate and inform consumers about the risks that they're facing should they choose to consume pirated content. Another example would be the cable television and streaming portions of the Television Critics Association tour. CTAM manages those portions of the tours so that we can help our content provider companies put their best foot forward in front of all of the media and entertainment critics. And that's becoming more and more important today as this peak TV and proliferation of content and adoptions comes flying at consumers. We're working on that not just from the awareness and publicity perspective, but also from the search, discovery, navigation, curation perspective to create exceptional consumer experiences. So those are just some examples of the type of work we do. All of our members are leaning in really hard to keep the consumer due north. And so that's our focus, and that's what drives our priorities.
Well, Vicki, thank you for that. And in full transparency for our group, I will concede that I've been a CTAM, proud CTAM member for many years, and it's such a pleasure to serve with you in the organization. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I love a theme that you touched on. You said there's some things that really work better when we all work together. And that certainly will be a theme on leadership that I'd like to return to in a second. First, though, I want to let everyone know that's joined us on Zoom that we certainly want to take your comments and questions throughout the next half hour or so. You should have an opportunity to pose a question by clicking on the raise hand icon that should be, for most people, in the bottom Zoom bar on your screen. So we're going to keep an eye on that throughout the course of the conversation. If you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand and jump in. We have taken a few questions already from some people that have joined us today, and really, Vicki, we can't really not pose this question at the top. We heard this from several people that have joined the call, and I've been thinking of it myself. When you and I talked a month or so ago about doing this session, really it was all going to be about leadership during the pandemic, during COVID-19, during the work from home and shelter in place era. But of course, we've had a whole new set of circumstances thrust upon us over the last couple of weeks. In the tragic death of George Floyd, the huge resistance that's sprung up around the country, the protests that are happening in every major city. And it's been intellectually, at least, fascinating and somewhat anguishing, and almost a feeling of desperation for some of us as we've watched how these events have rolled out. And they certainly pose new challenges and new questions for those people in positions of leadership. Could you take a moment to reflect on this extraordinary time in history and how it's been affecting how you think about not only leading people, but how you lead your life and work within the industry?
Absolutely. So yesterday when Becky and I were talking about today's section, I said to her, I consider myself a living student of history. And she said, oh, I love that. You should say that. So Becky, I've said it. I consider myself a living student of history. And I think that's just important context for how I look at these things. When we were just dealing with the pandemic, I kept talking to my son about how we're living through this historic moment and that nothing in our lives like this is likely to ever happen again, that global pandemics just don't come around all that often. And someday if he's a dad, he'll be telling his kids about how grandma went to the grocery store with a mask and gloves and goggles, and we wiped everything down when we brought it in the house, and school became virtual and everybody hunkered down. And I mean, it's just a remarkable time to be living. And then on top of it, we now have this social justice awakening that has exploded in the country, which brings such tremendous opportunity with it. But to your point, Rob, also business challenges and a new dimension of challenge and opportunity. And so I do think it's very important that we stay conscious of the fact that we're living through history. I think that we have a responsibility to not just react and respond, but also to engage and try to play a positive role in the history that's in the making. I think that businesses and brands need to be very cautious and smart about how they do that. I recently tweeted a little bit about some observations about brand behavior, and I've heard from every brand and business imaginable over the past few weeks, trying to first weigh in on the pandemic, and now trying to weigh in on Black Lives Matter and the ensuing activity that's surrounding the passion for that cause. I will say that I think that the most profound responses and reactions are authentic and appropriate. And you can be authentic and not appropriate, and you can be appropriate and not authentic, and neither works. In our industry, I think that what we've seen, in the week or so since the activity from companies has really started to kick in. Most obviously, we're starting to now hear about programming that's getting canceled. Paramount has pulled Cops. A&E has pulled Live PD, which was an enormous global success for them. That was no small decision or statement that network chose to make. iHeartMedia and Warner Music have announced that they're going to eliminate the term urban music. So we see the music and radio industries weighing in. But there's all kinds of other examples, but we're seeing a react and respond environment right now. Oh, HBO Max has withdrawn gone with the wind from their platform, at least for the foreseeable future, because they deem it to be inappropriate content in the context of what's happening now. Some of these companies have left wiggle room in the future to bring these things back in a different iteration or in a different context. I think that's what we're seeing from the industry right now, is what's appropriate and expected of us in the context of our brand so that it's authentic, and also what's appropriate right now in the context of what's going on in the business.